harbor and protect these criminals after the crime.
If you know something, say something.
Call Crime Stop at 311, MOCA at 888-6622-847,
NIB at 811, or the JDN at 837-8888.
Together, we will defeat the gangs and develop a culture of peace in our country.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Ministry of National Security.
I saw you want to live. I walk and look over your shoulder. No sleep at night. I wonder if your family safe. Your mother, your brother, your sister, your youth them. And when you get catch, are you alone? But not there to help you. You have to talk for yourself a court. And then when you're gone behind the bars, them see them on their road. I live them life and I enjoy life. Gang violence don't make no sense. Leave gang violence alone. Let's work together and make Jamaica a safer and peaceful country. Let's all live good.
A message from the Ministry of National Security.
Okay, who she's attending online. Senator Dr. Longmore is attending online as well. Yes? Okay, so we have those two. We're waiting on those two to join us. Very well. Members, thank you so much, and thank you for being on time. Like I said, I apologize for the few minutes late start. This is indeed long in coming, and I'm happy that we are here and able to start the deliberations of this committee before we end the calendar year. So if I could just situate us for a moment, it's not intended for this meeting to be a substantive meeting. It is intended for us to sort out our housekeeping matters and to set some protocols and some targets for the way forward in relation to this committee. But if I could just to contextualize what we are doing, read the motion that resulted in the convening of this select committee. And this private member's motion was moved by Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, and I'm happy to say unanimously supported in the Senate, on both sides of the aisle, that is. And this motion reads as follows. Whereas Jamaica is a rapidly aging society with senior citizens constituting a critical mass of the population, and whereas estimates suggest that over 350,000, or approximately 13.2% of the population, can be classified as senior citizens, and whereas these individuals are regarded as vulnerable citizens, and whereas these individuals have toiled and labored for Jamaica, and whereas these individuals deserve to be treated with care, respect, and gratitude, and whereas we have seen from time to time the disregard, disrespect, and neglect of these individuals by family members, and whereas there is an urgent need to protect these vulnerable citizens, and whereas there is no specific legislation to protect the rights and dignity of senior citizens, be it resolved that this Honorable Senate call upon the government to establish specific legislation in the form of an Elderly Care and Protection Act to protect our senior citizens, and be it resolved that a special select committee of the Senate be established to deliberate on the scope and magnitude of the legislation to be formulated. That, members, is the motion that has brought us here today, and as I indicated, it was unanimously approved by the Senate on October 25th of this year. So, consequent on the motion, and just to indicate, our standing orders require motions of national policy to be deliberated on by a select committee. So we're here really in two prongs. That standing order rule talks about determining the appropriateness of the referral of the motion. And two, the motion itself, the substantive motion itself, requires us to deliberate on the issue of what would constitute an appropriate law governing the elderly, looking at issues of care and protection. I think in the first instance, we won't have any difficulty agreeing that indeed this is a most appropriate motion. In the second instance, I think is where the meat of our work will lie. So that is the procedural framework behind what we're doing. Now, I just want to say a few things about the substance of this motion and the work that we are going to be doing. And in particular, prior to this meeting, I will indicate to the members that I did have some consultations with the Legal Reform Department. And on your behalf, even before I had put it to you, I asked them to be preparing themselves to address us in this committee, to give us a context of where we are now. What is the legal framework at this time? Because what we really have in existence is a number of laws that do address the elderly population, but are perhaps scattered in different pieces of legislation. So I've asked them to sort of bring those to our attention so we can understand what is there, even before we begin to deliberate on what is needed in a comprehensive act. And that, I imagine, with your agreement, they will do at our first very substantive meeting. So without further ado, there are some housekeeping matters we need to deal with. And the first of those is the question of quorum. Before I go any further, Mrs. Beckford, are members online being monitored so that if they wish to interrupt or to make a comment, they are recognized in a timely way? Yes, please, please. There are times when we're online and it takes a little while before we're noticed. Okay, so the first question is the question of our quorum for our meetings. And I think it has largely, where's my standing orders? It has largely been solved for us by virtue of our standing orders. Select committees, let me just read the provision. Right. So the quorum of a special select committee under Standing Order 71 shall be such as shall be specified in the order of the Senate. In the case of the motion referred today, the Senate did not make any such specification. And so in the event that the Senate does not make a specification, we go then to, which one is it? 74.5. Unless the Senate otherwise directs, 3 members shall be the quorum. And in ascertaining whether there is a quorum present, the member in the chair shall not be excluded. So that the quorum would be the chair plus 2. If members had an objection to that, then we would need an order from the Senate. Hold on, hang on.
Figuring it out, yeah. Persons online would not be able to form quorum? No, they're not. Just to clarify.
I thank you for that question, Senator Longmore. My reading of, well, actually, no, that's not my reading of the standing order in relation to the select committee. Because the select committee speaks to attendance to the committee both virtually and also in person. So it doesn't limit who is present for quorum. Hang on, I'm open to members.
You want to open? So just to say though, even in a joint select committee, in an attempt to form quorum, the participants who are virtually attended have been included as members to form quorum. This is specific now for committees. That has been the entrenched practice. So I see it no different in this regard. So yes, they can form quorum. The only stipulation for not forming quorum is the Senate sitting itself, that those attending virtually cannot form quorum nor vote. Yeah, but if we are incorporating the use of hybrid formats for our committees, then there is no distinction between utilizing the members who have joined virtually to form quorum and to participate and also to vote.
Thank you for that, Senator Gill. Senator Longworth.
Yeah, so I'm recalling when we had the discourse around this. What I'm trying to make sure, I have no problem. I'd be happy because I wish I knew we could have joined virtually to this meeting because that was more convenient for me. But I thought we needed quorum in-house because that's what I remember. I don't remember a distinction being made between Senate sitting and select committees. So I'm just wanting us to make sure that we are within the right remits. If we need to make a correction or so, but let us just make sure we get it right. Thank you.
So let's
there
just
was a distinction made. Okay.
So let's just put it on the record, the standing order that governs that. And that would be Standing Order 74, Procedure in Select Committees. And if you turn your attention to subparagraph 8, the first meeting of a select committee shall be held at such time and place as the chairman or the president shall appoint. Subsequent meetings shall be held at such time and place as the committee may determine, provided that if the committee fails to do so, the chairman shall, in consultation with the clerk, appoint such time and place. And B is the significant one. The word place includes a virtual space created using information and communications technologies. The word meeting shall include any duly convened meeting of members of a committee at a particular physical location in a virtual space or in a physical space in respect of which access and participation from remote locations by members and other persons authorized by the chair has been enabled by means of information and communications technology. So this standing order that was amended, I think, I'm sorry, let me read D. All members participating in any meeting of a committee as defined in subparagraph C, which I just read, shall enjoy all the rights and privileges normally accorded to a member of a committee of the Senate. So members participating online are going to be voting members and quorum members as well. So I think we have that settled. My desire, and I will make it known here, is that members, to the extent, particularly when we are hearing submissions from the public, to the extent that members can make a serious attempt to be present in the chamber, that would be my preference, so that we can have a little bit more robust discussions with those who attend to share their concerns and their submissions with us in person. So the matter of the quorum is settled at 3. Members are able to vote and to participate fully, whether they are online or in person. So now we come to the question of, just to be clear, so the format of our meetings will always be here in the chamber. But however, members who have a difficulty attending in person a link will be sent to you so that you can participate, as it is a hybrid format that we will use. Any concerns, any questions, any comments from members who are online? And I see none. Okay. Moving on. The way forward in terms of how the committee will begin the substantive work. I've already indicated to the committee that I have asked the Legal Reform Department to brief us on the state of the law today. I've also asked them to include in their brief examples of jurisdictions who have engaged this work and who have in place a law specifically dealing with the elderly. And so they will do that, if members have no objection, at our first substantive meeting, presumably in the new year. Beyond that, the normal course of action is for the Parliament to issue invitations to relevant bodies to provide us with submissions on the subject matter or on particular matters of concern to them that are relevant to the committee's work. And to that extent, our practice is to sort of name some bodies in this initial meeting. And that is in addition to the public advertisements that will go out to the public at large to ask them to participate. I think in the spirit of Dr. Morris's motion and in the spirit of the work to be done, we want as broad, as wide, and as robust a participation as we can get from the public. So I have also asked Parliament to ensure that the messaging and public education messaging on the committee's work and on the on our meetings as they are set is widely distributed so that the public can be aware of what we're doing, and the opportunities to participate will allow as many people as possible, as many groups as possible, to be able to have a say in the work that we're doing here. So I'm going to ask members now. Mrs. Beckford, we had a list, yes, of bodies? All right. While we're looking at that, I'm going to ask members if they have any specific suggestions that we ought to be taken into consideration. Dr. Morris, Percy Bott.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with the general direction that we are heading. I was wondering at first in the documentation coming from the legal advisors, if they will also do a sort of gap analysis to indicate where the gaps are with our existing legislative framework, because we don't have any specific legislation. So, but there are other Commonwealth jurisdictions that would have specific legislation, and they could do some comparisons and give us some indication as to where the gaps are that would guide us on our way. Also, Madam Chair, I would want to see, as we move forward in the committee, there were some very important presentations from members of the Senate in the debate, and I think those presentations should form a part of the documentation that we have, because critical suggestions were made. And we could probably even invite those senators who would want to come and present on what they have suggested, we could invite them to make their presentation. Now, in terms of suggestion for individuals to come and participate in the deliberations, something that, there's no debate about that. It's now to make sure that, we get the best experts. Definitely at the head of the queue must be Professor Denise Eldemeyer Shearer, who has done extensive work, and I think the invitation should be extended to the Mona Aging and Wellness Center where she is based. There is Sandra Latibaudier from the Department of Psychology, Social Work, the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work at the University of the West Indies as well. She has done extensive work on the subject matter. There is one other person that I want.
Professor Morris, just repeat where Dr. Latibaudier's department is called again.
The Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, definitely would want to get an invitation from the Caribbean.
Caribbean Community for Retired Persons.
For retired persons, right. Definitely would want to have them making the presentation. And the Council for Senior Citizens, as a government agency with responsibility for persons with senior citizens, would have to make a presentation as well. We want to get some the Jamaica Bankers Association, because the banks is a major concern for our senior citizens, not just only in terms of their financial transactions, but also, in terms of the services that they offer to them. I mean, senior citizens go there and there are no bathroom facilities to accommodate the senior citizens, and if they don't open up their personal offices for them to have access, it's just inconvenient for them, and that is something that we have to remedy. So those are my initial suggestions now, and then we're gonna have to also have an idea as to what it is that this legislation should look like, what it is that we want to see collectively for Jamaica. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, sorry. I'm just accustomed to saying Mr. Chair.
That's all right. That's all right, Senator Morris. You'll get used to it.
And you look better there. But, Madam Chair, I mean, this legislation is going to be so significant and historic because it is going to be touching on a large block of our population, our senior citizens. And we have to make sure that we put forward the best legislation. And what you have now is a collective mindset from both government and opposition to formulate this piece of legislation. And I really think that we need to put all our efforts. I am very happy that Senator Longmore is on the committee because the whole issue of dementia is a big issue right now facing the elderly population. Right now, as I speak, Madam Chair, I'm here, but I am all over St. Catherine and St. Mary with my mind searching for my uncle who has dementia, and we have not been able to locate him from last week, Monday.
My goodness, I'm sorry to hear that.
And, you know, that is one of the reasons why I am going to be very relentless in this piece of legislation, because there are some things that we have to do urgently to make sure that we take care of our senior citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. And I share your sentiments. I don't think you're going to be relentless alone. I think there's a collective mindset on this committee. Certainly was demonstrated in the debate in the Senate when this motion was approved. So I expect our members, all members of this committee, to offer the same diligent and urgent approach to the work that we have to do. And I'm glad you mentioned the comfort you feel with Senator Dr. Longmore being present with us, because I too agree that her participation in this committee is certainly going to be well needed. But I also want to caution us, as I was cautioned by Most Honorable Professor Dr. Denise Eldemeyer, that dementia, the concerns about the elderly and the work we're seeking to do in crafting a law should be careful not to be tunnel visioned on the issue of dementia alone. And the perspectives we will get from elderly members and from people like Prof. Shera will highlight what I am saying. She cautioned me some weeks, maybe a couple months ago, when there was some comments made on the radio station that we needed to be careful that we did not characterize our work using the word dementia all the time. It's a sensitive issue for elderly folks. And as we go through our work, I know we will hear from relevant stakeholders who will help us to understand the perspective of the elderly. One of the things I want to ask the committee members too to bear in mind, and some of us might be a little closer to it than others, is that we're here crafting a law, or crafting the framework of a law that none of us as of yet are feeling and are experiencing elderly years. And when I look at all of the technocrats who are going to be supporting us certainly in the ministries and the legal technical persons, none of them are elderly either. But we all have elderly family members, and if God is good to all of us, we will all become elderly at some point. So I say that to say that there is going to be a need for us to hear directly from the elderly population. And I've already started getting calls from elderly members of the population. I got a call about 2 or 3 weeks ago from a retired public servant and educator who is a member of a group, as she described it, of octogenarians and nonagenarians. And I believe she was 92. Very robust discussion. She was very passionate about her thoughts about what we were going to be doing, and she wished us well. And if I can call her name, Mrs. Veronica Carnegie, who many of you may know, served as an educator in this country for many years, and I think still writes and publishes her writing. So I know we may very well hear some of the concerns that her group of, I think, about 6 persons in that age bracket have. And that's going to be important. I want to throw out to the committee, but before I do that, so we have a list right now. Prof. Sherat Mona Aging, Dr. Sandra Latibaudiere, Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work. I can't even read my own writing without my glasses. Caribbean Community for Retired Persons, Council for Senior Citizens, which is a part of the Ministry of Labor, Jamaica Bankers Association, and I'm very glad that Senator Morris mentioned that one. And I would also add to that list, Mrs. Beckford, the relevant department in the Ministry of Health. I would also, yes, make that bigger for me so I can see it. That I would also want to suggest that we also hear from the relevant department in the Ministry of National Security or the constabulary force in relation to the kinds of crimes and acts perpetrated against the elderly, and in particular, persons from the cybercrime unit who may have an insight in terms of legal provisions that we need to consider. We had also discussed hearing from the umbrella group of churches or the church, and I say that quote unquote, there are a number of different bodies in the group of churches that may well have an insight because they serve the elderly population in their communities, and many of them have large elderly populations. We may also wish to hear from some of the international groups who have crafted significant international policy on aging and on elderly populations, the care and protection of them. So people like PAHO, WHO, UN Women, who are normally active in policy work, we may wish to hear from them as well. Those are my additional suggestions. Senator Morris, is that your mic? Is your mic on or no? No, okay. Okay, did I turn yours off? I apologize. Okay. Senator Gale?
Chair, you might want to, oh, there you go. I think we are moving in the right direction. And I'm happy in terms of what has been so far laid on the table. And over the period to which we, before we next meet, we can still contemplate those other important groupings that we want to identify. I think we're having in my mind, three critical opportunities here. One, to identify all those legislations who positively impact the elderly. But we're having another critical and important feature by this exercise, in that we can amalgamate a critical legislation. This is the opportunity now to harmonize legislations and to come up with one particular legislation uniquely enough to represent the elderly. But the third dimension to it is that you have all those policies out there governed by institutions, governed by respective ministries, that we may have the opportunity to interrogate, to be able to suggest or recommend amendments to those policies, much to the benefit of senior citizens. And you spoke about a particular area of the Ministry of Labor, the senior citizens aspect. But I also want us to invite the Ministry of Labor itself, more so on the social security side, for us to examine the question of how the NIS is operating now, how that can benefit senior citizens in the future, what other recommendations can be put forward. So we'd like to hear from them in terms of what are the work they're doing, and if it can be interrogated sufficiently enough where positive recommendations can be put forward to enhance. So I'm seeing a myriad of activities that can take place through this one select motion itself going forward in the future. So I think it's a very critical approach that we're taking. And I want to commend us and you, Chair, for that approach.
Thank you, Senator Gale. Senator Longmore, did you wish to speak? Your mic was on.
But you want to respond to Cavan, or?
No, I don't know that there's a response other than that's all a part of where we're going. So we have made note of those, Senator Gale, and they will form part of the list of the express invitations delivered. Okay. Senator Longmore.
Thank you. Very happy to be a part of this joint select committee, and I think a very timely motion, private members' motion, that we are here discussing. I want to just add to the list of persons for direct invite to be considered, most definitely the Jamaica Psychiatric Association. We tend to seem to skirt around the very significant impact of the not just dementia, but the significant mental health challenges, and let me reframe it, mental wellness challenges that our elderly population face. At that time, there's significant incidence of depression, long-term effects of trauma, etc., etc. So the Jamaica Psychiatric Association, I would definitely seek to invite for their contribution. Specifically, you have one or two persons who have interest in Alzheimer's research, other forms of dementia research, who are aligned with the Psychiatric Association, and so I think we should make specific effort to, I will seek out who those are. I have an idea, but I want to confirm before I say who those persons might be, because, you know, and I'm just bringing it to this attention here. We are finding in the medical space that dementia is almost becoming what we call type 3 diabetes. That is what the latest research is showing. And I say this to say that a significant impact, dementia doesn't start after 65. The processes occur prior to that. Yeah. And so we need to have the measures in place before the age that we are recognizing as the direct point of effect. So I would want for us to have those persons who can contribute to the awareness of such preventative measures so we can seek to address it preventatively. Also, when this committee was named, someone reached out to me directly, like from the get-go, Mrs. Eulette Gordon, former executive director of the Jamaica Cancer Society. And she specifically requested, whether in her capacity as such or as a private citizen, to make a presentation here because she has significant interest in this space. So I have to bring that to the fore here and appreciate her communicating with me. Lastly, a significant portion of our elderly population is seen in our agricultural spaces. A lot of persons in their latter years go into that space, not just because it might be economically one of the few things that they're able to continue being productive with, but it's also significantly therapeutic. And I think a significant amount of our farmers are in that space. And so if there is a specific group, I don't know, perhaps it's something that we should look into in our deliberations. In terms of the elderly population within our agricultural spaces, I would love to hear from that perspective how we may best orchestrate legislation to suit their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Longmore. I'm watching my colleagues online. I don't see any hands. Is that Senator Fraser been speaking too? Okay. Okay. All right. I think it's important. I thank you for that, Senator Longmore. And I think it's important at this juncture just to say that the context of this motion and the work that we're asked to do is really to inquire into the issues affecting and to look at the scope and the magnitude of legislation to be formulated. So I think we need to be very clear that at the end of our process, we're not necessarily going to have a draft bill. We will have the makings of what a bill should contain that we are then seeking to deliver to our cabinet for their deliberation to come back to the Parliament with an actual bill that can be tabled, debated, and passed in the Houses. And that's a different process than when we're reviewing a draft bill or critiquing a draft bill or an existing act. So it means that they're going to be very broad, broad recommendations, and we may get down into the nitty-gritty. But what we're doing here is quasi-policy and legislative as well. So if my committee members can remember that, so we are guided, so that we're not going left field, right field in our deliberations. I'm coming to Senator Fraser-Binns. I want to say also that we will find, as exists now, that there are several initiatives that the government has undertaken that address elderly needs in the areas of health, in the areas of social welfare and support. And some of those initiatives, as we will discuss in this committee, are not initiatives or protection mechanisms that necessarily will be enshrined in law. So one of the things I want us as a committee to do is to be very clear on our outcome, that in addition to the recommendation to the cabinet that a law should be drafted that contains these 40 headings, that we are also clear on the adequacy of the policies that are currently in place and our urging to our government to continue to amend, to improve, or to add to, is one of the outcomes that I think that would be valuable to the community in relation to those matters that would not be matters that one would enshrine in legislation. I know the members are hearing the loud bands outside. The Parliament is hosting a Christmas treat today and fetting the community members for the holidays. So we are going to try and wrap up before the noise takes us over. But Senator Fraser-Binns. Senator Fraser-Binns, we're not hearing you. Are you muted? Members, I'm going to ask that if we can just pause for 2 minutes so we can resolve the sound issues. Okay, do we have IT? Senator Fraser-Binns, can you try again now, please?
Good morning, Chair.
Yes, yes, we're hearing you. Turn her up a little bit, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I too want to congratulate Senator Floyd Morris and for this motion and yourself for convening the meeting. Madam Chair, when we think about the type of legislation, I just want to make some recommendations as to some persons that I believe we should invite. And I know that both senators...
Senator Fraser-Binns, I'm so sorry. We're having a little challenge hearing you. If IT could just turn up the volume. Yes?
Yes, yes, Chairman. Is this much better?
Much better. Go ahead.
Okay, very well. Yes, yes, Madam Chair. I'm not sure how much you heard, but briefly, I extended congratulations to yourself for convening the meeting and to Senator Dr. Morris for moving this successful motion. And I wanted to just make some recommendations in terms of persons or committee individuals I believe should be invited to share their views. And I know that Senators Morris and Dr. Longmore would have mentioned some specific individuals, but I want to ask that we invite the MAJ. And the reason for that is the general practitioner really in so many ways is the first point of contact when it comes on to any issue, any medical issue that the elderly has to deal with. And so I want to recommend that we invite the MAJ as a body for a presentation. Additionally, because I'm very much aware that we are not doing legislation but policy, but because there are so many different pieces of legislation that touch and concern our elderly, I wondered whether it would be appropriate to invite the Bar Association for them to make a presentation, and as well as the insurance company. We spoke about the banks, but the insurance companies as well, I think, would be critical in this process as we talk about, insurance for the elderly. And finally, Madam Chair, and perhaps out of the box, but the care of the elderly, physically, mentally, oftentimes is done at home and by a carer. The Household Workers Association is important. I don't know if there's another association that deals with practical nurses, but I believe that they can bring to the discussion a kind of almost a personal experience which will inform policy. And if the committee agrees, then I believe that we could speak with the Household Workers Association to see if they would be willing to engage us and share experiences, which will help to inform policy as well. And of course, this is in addition to what normally takes place in terms of the wide notice. And I'm very happy that you have already addressed the issue of wide consultation and social media and public education in this regard. Because for me, at least my thinking, and you said it, is that it ought not to be limited to just the medical side, which is very important, but ought not to be limited to the medical, but a holistic approach in terms of how do we treat and care for the elderly. And that is where I think the public education is going to be important, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fraser-Binns. Senator Gill?
Just one addition that Senator Charles Sinclair has asked for statin to be incorporated for us to have some demography on the elderly population.
Thank you for that. Yes, and in the same breath too, I think we perhaps should add the Nurses Association to our list. I do believe they would cover, Senator Longmore, correct me if I'm wrong, they cover both registered nurses and practical nurses, don't they? The Nurses Association, yes. So we would perhaps wish to hear from them. Quite often, excuse me, practical nurses are found in homes where they care for the elderly, both official homes of care as well as individual family homes, but also nurses in the hospitals and clinics are often that link between the medical care and the family members. And so I think they would also be useful for us to speak to. I don't want us, I feel like I'm being played out of the building, so I don't want us to go for too much longer. Let me just ensure. I want to say a few words about our engagement of the public. There are, I do believe, many elderly folk who would wish to have their voices heard, who don't necessarily have a group representing them, and there are unique issues that face the elderly. Sometimes it's not a one-size-fits-all matter. And to that end, I would wish to discuss with the committee, perhaps not in this meeting, because I think we perhaps need to work out some logistics, but I would wish to discuss with the committee how the committee hears from the general public across Jamaica. It may be that may be some sort of online forum, even though that in and of itself can be difficult for elderly persons who don't have support to participate in. But it may mean that the committee may have to take itself to the people as opposed to waiting for the people to be able to get to the Parliament and to the committee. I will discuss the matter with the Parliament and see if there's any way we can have some contact and engagement in the West, certainly the three counties, the West, the South, the North, the East of the country, so that we can ensure that at the end of the day, when the work of this committee is complete, we have heard fulsomely from those most impacted by the work that this committee is engaging. On that note, our first meeting, therefore, will be our context meeting that will have the Legal Reform Department presenting to us, and I will, Senator Dr. Morris, update my request to them to include the matters that you asked in relation to the gap analysis, not just what exists, but what they see as the gap. And so we will ask them to present first. Members, it is my hope and intention that we can robustly engage. And to that end, we'll have to give persons sufficient time to prepare themselves to come before us. So can I ask the committee, what would be your thoughts in terms of the time, accepting that nobody's going to really be able to do anything until after the 1st of January. Persons are going to shut down, organizations are going to shut down for family time. So from the 1st of January, 2nd of January, how much time do you think we would allot before bodies are able to come before us? The normal time is what, 6 weeks? Well, the end of January will be the analysis from the legal reform. So we did have a date proposed. The 29th of January is when legal reform will come before us. So once we have that date, once we get through that meeting and matters arising from that meeting, I also bear in mind that the Parliament will prorogue sometime, usually in February. And there will have to be, if nothing changes, there will have to be motions to have the work of the committee carried over.
Madam Chair.
I didn't hear.
Are you hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Go ahead, Senator Sinclair.
All right. You spoke about the potential first meeting being the 29th with the legal reform. That would be looking at what presently exists at the very least. But I'd ask, because of the technological glitch that existed, for Senator Gale to suggest starting, because they should already have information at hand as to the numbers that we're going to be dealing with, data in respect to elderly persons, if they could also be on that day or early in the day, so that we can understand the context in which we are going to be moving forward with the various proposals. they should be able to provide their information almost instantaneously. I'm certain that they do updates on a regular basis and should have it at hand.
Very well, Senator Sinclair, and thank you for that suggestion. So we'll also write to ask Statin to join us on the 29th of January. My hope is that beyond that, we should be able to take 3 submissions for each meeting. And because we're going to have so many groups, I suspect, participating, it perhaps would be advisable for us to have a set presentation time where groups can come and highlight what they wish to bring to our attention, separate from the written submissions, which could be more detailed, you know, if those who were submitting chose to do it that way. So if we can perhaps have submissions that have a maximum of what? 15 minutes? 15 minutes, which would allow 3 submissions, therefore, in 45 minutes. And then if we talk about interrogation time, I think you can probably double that. So that'd be half an hour, yeah. So I think that would be safe, 3 submissions for each meeting. I am proposing to the committee for your consideration that we try and get the MDAs and associated government entities in first. They have the capacity, I think, to be prepared quicker. And also it will help us in the context of what exists. And we'll be able to interrogate what exists before we even begin to hear from the relevant stakeholders and associations who I know will come with further insight as to what is working and what is not working. So I'm making that proposal to the committee.
Chair.
Senator Longmore.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it might be a little bit morbid, but it is the reality of what we are dealing with. And such is the nature of seeking to prepare persons at this stage of life. I am wondering if the other stage, in terms of the processes that relate to death and preparation for death, if we may be able to have input from that industry also, considering the significant import of such.
Very well, very well. I have no difficulty with that. And I can certainly say that they have a perspective on the legal hurdles that families encounter when a loved one is dying and has passed. So we will add that and find the relevant stakeholders in that area. Senator Dr. Morris.
You had put forward a suggestion. Yes, Madam Chair. Just reminding that during the debate you had put forward some suggestions towards the will for senior citizens as well. So that has to form a part of the discussion. And also I would
Senator Dr. Morris, let me interrupt you and just add before it flies out of my mind, the Administrator General's Department.
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
Go ahead now.
And I want to suggest that the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities and the Combined Disabilities Association be included as well.
Jamaica Council
for Persons with Disabilities.
Yes.
And the Combined Disabilities Association.
Very well.
Because of the intersectionality between disability and aging.
Very well. Thank you for that. Thank you for that intervention. Okay, so we have agreed it will be 15 minutes per presentation. We have agreed on the first meeting we will seek to hear from the Legal Reform Department and Statin. And thereafter, we will seek to hear at least a minimum of 3 submissions. It may be possible, depending on the length and depth of the submissions, that we can hear more. But I hope members are understanding my approach is we do as much as we can, as quickly as we can. and then there will be the drilling down. I'm also going to ask the Parliament through the committee clerk to prepare for us I guess a matrix of the suggestions that senators had made in the debate, and they can pull that, of course, from the parliamentary records, so that we have that on that first meeting on the 29th of January as part of the context of what we're looking at as well. The deadline date for submissions, members, then, so we are talking about, it seems to me that's after Parliament for road. February 15th is the suggestion. That will give the month of January, part of February. No. The adverts?
Having two things. The public advisory.
I'm sorry, Senator Gill. Give me one moment, please.
Sure.
Go ahead, Senator Gill.
So we'd formally advise the public and ask for any submissions in general. But also we'd be submitting to these defined groupings, making for them to make their submissions. I'm asking, when are we going to recommend that those go out? By when?
Those will go out immediately. There's no reason for those to be delayed because we're writing to them from the Parliament. The usual publications in the newspapers will go out as soon as the new year starts. They tend to get lost in the Christmas if we were to have them put out now. So those kind of
when we use social media nowadays,
social media can happen immediately, and social media can be repeated periodically. I'm really talking about the newspaper ones.
Yes, understood.
That would await the new year. So the invitations to the specified groups can go out immediately. The social media can go out immediately. And I will also have discussions with the communications department of the Parliament to ensure that they're doing periodic communication. And in fact, Madam Committee Clerk, it's not normally done, but I think it would be useful for us to have a member of the communications team present at our meetings, or at least monitoring our meetings. They usually monitor. I'm told they usually monitor our meetings online. So with that said, the goal is to ensure that there's as much engagement and communication with the public as possible. So our deadline date is the 15th of February for submissions, and it may very well be that somehow the purgation of Parliament falls in that time. So it may end up working out that it's a little bit more time than that. However, we work with the 15th and until further advised, and then whatever is necessary to be done to ensure that there's continuity will most certainly be done at that time. So members, our next meeting is the 29th. At that meeting, I will also have a position to put forward to you, having discussions with the Parliament as to how we do a cross-island consultations after hearing the submissions that are scheduled. 10 a.m. is the time for that meeting, 10 a.m. on the 29th of January. And if there is no other business, there would be committee sittings, Dr. Morris, which is why I need to have some discussions with the Parliament just to understand how they see the logistics of that being delivered. being mindful, of course, of cost. All right, so if there's no other business, and I don't believe there is, I ask for a motion for adjournment. And before I do that, I just want to thank the members for attending and for contributing today. I look forward to this very important work that we will do, and I trust that we will be earnest and in the spirit that we have engaged this work to do it in the interest of our country. Thank you so very much. A motion for adjournment. Moved by Senator Dr. Longmore and seconded by Senator Gale. Thank you, members.